Debbie, Dad's oldest daughter. I'm sure you all remember good King Wenceslas and how he walked through the snow, making a path for those who came after him. Well, Dad walked through some deep drifts in his life, and he made beautiful, risky, adventurous, and blessed paths for us to follow. One of those paths took us to France in 1961. We were a family of 7. I was 15, and the youngest, Muffy, was 3. Dad organized a VW bus for us, and we traveled to the little Protestant town of Le Chambon-sur-Lignon. We older kids attended the Collège Sévenol, and we were surrounded by teachers and townspeople who had put their faith to the test during World War II by sheltering and protecting Jewish people and helping many to escape into safety. For me, this was a powerful lesson in a wider understanding that we were absorbing all the time as our migratory family trekked across America and Europe. That understanding was that commitment to justice is hard work, that it entails risk, and that this is an important part of what life is for. That path was also marked by a deep and abiding empathy. Dad told me once that in August 1945, when the war ended, people poured out into the streets of Seattle to celebrate. And Dad walked amongst the crowds, and tears were rolling down his face as he thought of the unimaginable suffering that the Japanese people had endured and would continue to endure. I hadn't yet been born, but I could see Dad walking the streets of Seattle on that day, and it makes me appreciate all the more the effort he put into bringing care and aid to Japan and Korea during those hard years. Another of Dad's paths was a scholarly one. I followed that path in my life, and I've had many lovely moments when I realized that something I thought I was encountering for the first time was actually something I'd been introduced to by Dad. So I studied anthropology, and I remember that back in the 50s, Dad was talking about Margaret Mead and the coming of age in Samoa. I sneaked off into the corners of the library to read about ancient Indo-European languages, and I remember Dad talking about the decipherment of Linear B. I leapt into questions of the history of Western philosophy, and remember Dad talking about the origins of Greek thought. Some of you will have heard about some of these books yourselves if you've spent time with Dad, I'm sure. Well, Dad read and read and read. He read to us, and he read his own books in old and fascinating languages. All of us kids knew that Rabelais existed long before we even dreamed of trying to read him. Dad wrote that his love affair with the Romance languages began at Tufts in 1935 when he encountered a translated section of Rabelais. From then on, he read his English Rabelais at least once a year, often more than once. And then in the mid-1950s, he decided to tackle it in the original French. From there, he went on to learn Provençal, Anglo-Norman, Old Spanish, and the Spanish of Cervantes' time. In 1984, he read a review in the Village Voice of a book called Tyran le Blanc, written in Old Catalan, and described by Cervantes as the greatest book in the world. So, of course, Dad had to read it. And, of course, he did, puzzling out the Old Catalan through his knowledge of related languages. All this reading was enhanced by trips to France, where he visited places that he was reading about in memoirs written hundreds of years previously, and where his vivid imagination enabled him to commune with the people he called his predecessor mortals from those distant years in Western Europe. We're talking about 900 years ago. Along with all this learning, Dad never lost his connection with the present, his concern about the nation and its future, his love of museums and travel, his love of his family, and his trust in the one above. He combined generosity, kindness, passion, and scholarship with a commitment to justice and an incredibly sweet concern for most all living creatures. I'm going to conclude with a poem written by my partner, Peter Boyle. On the face of it, it's a poem about poetry, and in its heart, it is about both literature and life, and the connection between them. In dedicating the poem to Dad, I'm praising the path of Dad's life, where what drew him to his love of learning and what he gave to us, his children especially, was all connected, learning and living and joined in a love that was both fierce and humble, a love for all the goodness in life. Of poetry. Great poems are often extremely simple. They carry their openness with both hands. If there's a metaphor lounging in a doorway, they step briskly past. The boom of generals and presidents with their rhetoric manuals will go on sowing the wind. The great poems are distrustful of speech. Quietly, like someone very old who has only a few hours left of human time, they gaze into the faces around them. One by one, they kiss love into our mouths.